Hi, my name is Andrew Rose and this is Astrocytes TV. I've been meaning to make a web series or whatever you want to call it about my experiences with MS, kind of based on my defunct podcast and blog of the same name for a while, but today I kind of got a kick in the pants, as they say, and a wake-up call, as they say in buzzword terms. But anyway, I was discharged earlier from Legacy Hospital in Vancouver, Washington, where they took really great care of me, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm not so grateful for what brought me there in the first place. And that was on Thursday. I woke up feeling a little off, and then I took a little nap at midday, and I woke up with a bunch of blood and vomit on my pillow. And then I proceeded to puke blood for several hours until I was well enough even for my husband to drive me to the emergency room. So I'm making this first episode of Astrocytes on video to tell you guys that I'm not going to take Ocrevus anymore and give you some reasons why. But anyway, since this is the first episode, why don't we get some stuff out of the way. Like I said, my name's Andrew. I've had multiple sclerosis since 2011, or at least it's when I was diagnosed. I think I've had it a lot longer than that. And I'm not a doctor or a medical professional, so don't take my advice without talking to one of those kinds of people first. The whole point of Astrocytes to begin with, when it was a podcast, was I wanted to just I've accumulated a lot of knowledge about this bullshit disease over the past 10 years. And I've had doctors tell me that, your knowledge of this disease outpaces mine, and I don't think that's because I'm some sort of genius. It's just that over the past 10 years, I've learned that if you don't learn about the disease yourself, if you don't learn what you need for yourself, then someone else is going to make that decision for you. And I've never been very good with other people making decisions for me. One of the really pivotal moments of my life actually occurred over a period of about 9 months, and it was in 2015 when I had to move back to Oregon from New York City. It wasn't exactly my decision. To be honest with you, I graduated from a really great journalism program at NYU, and I just couldn't get a job and couldn't pay my bills. So I ended up back in Oregon living with my mom, and there are worse fates in life, but because of the way these drugs work, these MS drugs, they're super expensive. You can't just have your family doctor call in a script and pick it up at Walgreens. So it took a total of 9 months between my last dose in New York and my resuming the medicine Gilenya, or fingolimod as I'll call it, in Oregon. And unfortunately, by that time, it was a little bit too late. In 2018, FDA issued an official warning saying that, if you go off fingolimod, your MS could get much, much worse permanently. And that is kind of what happened to me. I went from being what's called relapsing remitting, which is one of the 4 basic types of MS, to secondary progressive. And that's had a lot of consequences for me, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So the way I was able to finally get my Gilenya, even if it didn't work, was I got a job at OHSU, Oregon Health Science University. It's the best medical school in Oregon. It's the only medical school in Oregon. It's a pretty good place. I still have doctors there, and they do a very good job. But the Gilenya at that point was unable to literally reach the places it needed to go. When you have what's called relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, the blood-brain barrier, which everybody has, it's a thin layer of cells that separates your normal bloodstream from your brain and your spine and stuff like that. And that's important for reasons we'll cover later. But when you have that, it's no longer sealed, it's kind of porous. And so some of these normal immune cells, they get into your brain, into your central nervous system, your CNS, and they see nerve cells, and they see something called myelin, which you'll hear a lot about if you have MS or you know somebody who has MS, and they attack it because they think it's an enemy invader. And that results in lesions or scleroses. That's where the name comes from. You've got multiple scleroses in your brain and your spine. And with relapsing remitting MS, the good thing about the blood-brain barrier being porous is that when you get an infused medicine put into your bloodstream, it can reach your brain and your spinal cord and all that good stuff. And it can help kill those B cells, which really do cause MS progression, and it can make you a lot better if you take the right medicine. But the thing is that what happened to me is I went from having relapsing to progressive MS. And with that, you can kind of think of it as like when you have relapsing and remitting MS, which incidentally is the most common kind, more than half of people with MS have that kind, the windows are all open, the blood-brain barrier, so the baddies can get in, but so can the medicine that can help protect you by killing those cells that are where they should not be in your body. When you have progressive MS, the windows are all shut, and it goes from being inflammatory, like I said, to neurodegenerative. And that's not good. Inflammatory is kind of good because like you'll have a flare-up and you'll have an episode or whatever you want to call it, and you'll get sick for a while, but usually you'll get better. Maybe you'll get all the way better. But when you have progressive MS and neurodegeneration, what's happening is those nerves are dying. The axon is dying along with a lot of other bad stuff. We'll definitely talk more about nerves and their anatomy, but basically the axon is the thing that like feels things, but it's surrounded by myelin, which is the insulation, like the wire and an electrical cord. And so when that insulation is gone, your body doesn't understand that there's no insulation, and so I guess it can kind of overreact to input, sensations, stuff like that. Now, long story short, I went from having the good kind of MS, as they say in the West Wing, to having the not so good kind. So Ocrevus has been really life-changing for a lot of people. I mean, it's a really powerful medicine that really works if you have relapsing MS, and it's great that people have access to that. But it does make it all the more, bitter for me to have to give it up because it's never worked for me, and now it seems to be actively fighting against my own body. So we can't have that. So to give you an idea of what that fighting looks like, in 2017, around the end of 2017, I had what's called a perirectal abscess, which is as unpleasant and gross as you would imagine. It's an abscess in your perirectum area around the inside of your butt, and an abscess is it's like an infection or a sore inside your body. And so as a result, I had to have surgery for that, which was extremely painful. And it was no less painful a month later when it recurred. Fortunately, they were able to fix it such that it's not come back since then, but I haven't forgotten the memory. And another problem I've had are salivary gland infections. In fact, in 2019, I had to have surgery to have a stone removed from my salivary gland. It was also unpleasant. And what these two things have in common, besides being opportunistic infections, is their location. They're located in the mucosa. The mucosa are your pretty pink parts inside and in your mouth and yada yada. And the B cells, it's believed, actually are very important in protecting those parts. So by killing them, you're putting yourself at a higher risk for infection. And again, if you have been diagnosed today with relapsing and remitting MS, I would strongly encourage you, if I were your friend, to go on Ocrevus. It is great medicine, and it is definitely worth it if it's going to help you, but it's not helping me, so that's why I'm making this video. So I know that's been a lot of information even for this short film that I'm making here, but we'll get to everything in due time. As I said, I was released from the hospital today. They gave me some good antibiotics that are killing whatever the heck is in my left lung here. But there are other considerations too. For instance, there's a recent study showed that if you have MS and you take what's called a DMT, disease-modifying therapy, like Ocrevus or fingolimod, 23% or so of the people taking Ocrevus produced detectable antibodies to the COVID vaccine, whereas people who had no DMT on board, of course, 100% of them produced antibodies, and people taking the medicine called cladribine, which I'm probably going to switch to soon, 100% of those produced antibodies. So not only am I getting these infections, but I am putting myself at greater risk because the vaccine's not working for me. I'll finish up by saying, we can't categorically say that all these infections were directly related to Ocrevus, that but for Ocrevus, I wouldn't have gotten them, but there's some pretty stiff circumstantial evidence, and it's enough for me. I've already talked to my neurologist, and I'm going to switch to cladribine later this year. Hope to tell you how that goes. you know, I've had a lot of really dark days with this disease, being home alone, not able to work, fatigued to the point that I can't move, abscess in my ass, and I'm making this web series mostly because I want to be a hope in the dark, as Rebecca Solnit puts it. I hope that people watching this, you know, you can learn from my mistakes, you can learn from my triumphs, be they as they may. There aren't that many of them, but and I just want to give people with MS and people who care for people with MS just kind of information they need to go to their neurologist or to live their lives, or the kind of disability stuff, because it's very confusing. And I say that as someone who is rarely confused about medical stuff. You know, my family is a family of doctors and nurses, and so I grew up with these kinds of terms floating about in the house. But as I said earlier, even, you know, really good doctors say that I don't understand this disease, or, you know, you understand this aspect of it better than I do. And that's just because I've had it a long time, and I've had a lot of time to think about it and study it. And I really hope that I can help some people out. So thank you, and until next time.